Hello, this course is about mental wellness and resiliency, adjusting to life and addressing challenges in turbulent times. So just to set the stage, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing today. The first thing is understanding and framing the current situation. We're also going to be examining what stress does to our bodies, then learning how to use our most powerful resource, and learning new techniques for mental wellness and connection. So what are we dealing with? Well, the global pandemic is definitely a disaster, and it's a far-reaching disaster, but it's unlike most of the disasters that we have experienced in the past. So, and here's how it's different and why that's important. So let's take the example of the Northridge earthquake. So a catastrophic earthquake has many consequences, has a definitive beginning, a middle, and an end. The actual shaking for the earthquake is only for a few minutes, and then the rest of the time, people are dealing with the consequences of the impact of that event. This global pandemic, in comparison, has no definitive end, and we're not even really sure if we're out of response mode. We are moving into a new phase with the availability of vaccines, but COVID cases are still happening, so they're still a part of what we're doing as a nation that's in this response mode. We also very much have this triple threat of this pandemic, add severe economic decline, a very active social and political scene, and social upheaval and civil unrest, unlike that we've seen in a very long time. This disaster appears to be stretching on for some unforeseeable end. We're not really sure when recovery will happen. And then we're also dealing with something that relates to surge capacity. So surge capacity is a collection of adaptive systems that all humans have that are both mental and physical that we draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations, like dealing with the impact of a natural disaster. So we have been using all of those systems now for quite some time. So our systems are overtaxed. So it's very understandable that you might feel groggy at certain times, not able to process or not able to focus. Your brain is having a hard time making sense of this extra long time in which we're in this situation that is causing such severe stress. People are also dealing with job loss, having to teach their children at home if they have school-age children, making sure that technology is working or even that you have access to technology. So all of those are continued stressors without very much of a break. There's also something at play here called ambiguous loss, which is loss without really a resolution that you can see or any kind of understanding of why this is going on. So you might have heard adjusting to a new normal, but how do you adjust to an ever-changing situation where there seems to be indefinite uncertainty? The destruction for some may seem invisible and ongoing, and then all of those support systems related to our adaptive systems are not working right, or they have changed radically. What I mean by that is, so school is different, work is different, community and faith gatherings are different, home life is different. And even those kind of ordinary things that we use to kind of gauge what we're doing and how we're connecting people, like going to have coffee with someone or meeting someone in a community group, those are now not available. Another thing at play here is that our culture tends to be very action-oriented, and we are used to looking for solutions to whatever the problem is. And this can be a really good thing, and it has helped our society in many ways, like discovering new ways of doing things or new inventions, how to fly an airplane or get to outer space, for example. but it makes coping more difficult when, again, we're talking about a problem that does have a solution, but we're not sure about the solution and we're not sure about when the solution will come. We're also grieving the loss of our way of life. So our rituals have been disturbed: graduations, weddings, funerals, and even the daily rituals like going to the gym or having coffee. So as we experience this loss of relationships, we navigate who to listen to about COVID safety actions. You may have a disagreement with people that you care about what is the proper source or authority to listen to about what to do. Or you may have people in your circle that don't believe anything about what has been said about the virus. So all of those things are stressful. Also, it's going through a grieving process for those losses, even though it may not be a loss of a person in our life. We're losing our way of life, and those stages of grief are similar to that which you would experience if you had lost someone in your life. So it's important that you give yourself grace and that you understand that it's okay to not be okay in this situation. And I am going to give you some tools that will be helpful to move out of that stressful mindset. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is look at stress and the different types of stress and what those types of stress are doing to your body. So the first type of stress that we usually talk about is something called eustress. And this is usually very short term. And some people think of this type of stress as something that can motivate you. So sometimes it's associated with excitement. It can also focus your energy. It usually is perceived with being within our coping abilities, and it may even feel exciting. So this could be you're getting ready for a job interview, you're going to run a marathon, you have an important meeting where you're doing a presentation or something like that, you're doing public speaking that you're not familiar with or used to. All of those things can cause this, what we call eustress. The second type of stress is called acute stress, and this is often thought-induced. It may be connected to a recent incident. Let's say you had an argument with somebody you care about, you had missed an upcoming work deadline. This is usually also short-term. Sometimes it is accompanied by anger, irritability, body aches and pains, but mostly we think of acute stress as being manageable. The next type we move into is episodic acute stress. And this type of stress, for the person experiencing it, life is constantly chaotic and the person feels like they're in crisis all the time. Sometimes people with excessive competitive drive, accompanied with aggressiveness, may feel like this all the time. People who constantly worry to the point of not being able to function. This kind of stress can cause depression, make relationships difficult, and it can also interrupt your brain's processing speed. The last type of stress is chronic stress. This stress is often associated with long-term poverty, abuse of any kind, unemployment for long periods of time, a highly dysfunctional family, a poor work environment, substance abuse. In this type of stress, also the person feels hopeless, as if there's no escape and they see no solution. And chronic stress can actually change the biology of your brain. So now I am going to describe an activity for you that will help you move out of this negative space when you're feeling super stressed. So this is using imagery or a word clue to help you switch the thoughts in your brain from a negative to a positive. It will take some practice, but it's a fairly simple process. So the first thing that you would do is think of a word that describes how you feel right now. And then think of a time when you felt happy or were having fun, and attach a new word that will remind you of the time when you felt happy or were having fun. Write down this word so you'll remember what it is, and then you're going to use this word to switch in your brain to the time that you were having a good time. So I'll give you an example. So let's say I went on a hiking trip with my family, and so my word is going to be hiking. And when I'm in a stressful situation, I want to think to myself, hiking, and then have a mental picture of that hiking trip with my family, so that I'm actually training my brain to switch from what is in the now that's negative and moving it to this word imagery, or using that one word clue to switch your thoughts to that positive thinking. So as I said, it will take some practice, but you'll get used to it, and will definitely help you move immediately from the negative to the positive. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in your body when you're stressed. So there's the primitive brain versus the evolved brain. So you've probably heard the term brain in the gut, or that my gut instinct. That's because when you are stressed, your body releases cortisol into all of the areas of your body. And this is a stress hormone that increases the level of fear responses. This is a very long-term stress response that has been with humans for a long, long time. And usually it was because historically fear was connected to scarcity of some kind, or it meant that you were in some kind of danger, like you were being chased by a bear. So cortisol also can cause your body to hold on to fat, because if you're in a situation where there's no food, you might need that later. So to tame the cortisol effects on your body and your brain, which are negative, one of the simple things you can do is use either exercise or meditation, or a combination of the two, and even very small sessions of either one of those, 5 to 10 minute sessions, multiple times a day. If you can only do one 5-minute session, that's still helpful. Guided meditation is something that works for me. I have trouble doing it on my own without a guide. So there are a number of apps that do that. Headspace, there's one called Calm. There's also a lot of free meditations on YouTube. And as I mentioned, even 5-minute helps. And it actually has been shown scientifically to change your brain chemistry in a positive way. Another technique that's fairly easy to do is deep breathing, which also signals your body to slow down and can calm you immediately. So to demonstrate that, once you finish with this course, try this deep breathing or guided breathing. So you would inhale for 4 counts, and then hold your breath for 4 counts, and then exhale for 4 counts, and repeat this cycle for an entire minute. And you'll be surprised how you will feel that your body is actually slowing down. So you'll see also that there's a link here to a YouTube video, and the YouTube video talks about what stress is doing to our brain and our body, and reinforces the techniques of exercise and meditation. It's a short video, and you will see it here, and then you can go back and look at it anytime you would like that reinforcement. So now I'd also like to talk about some fairly easy things that you can do to help manage anxiety during this COVID time. So the first thing is to focus on things you can control. And this sounds really simple, but can be difficult. So it's important that you focus on, or remind yourself that I'm only going to think about the things that I can control. And the things that you can control can be fairly simple, like staying healthy, eating right, trying to get enough sleep, washing your hands, wearing a mask, limiting face-to-face interactions and no large gatherings. And as much as possible, do not spend time thinking about things you cannot control. So this also would mean maybe looking at what are those things that you can't control that you're going to limit your exposure to. So for example, if watching the news all the time is stressful for you, then instead of watching it for long periods of time, maybe watch for 5 or 10 minutes a day and then give yourself a break. Another important thing that I know many of us have experienced and longed for is connection with others. So even though it's harder to do that during the pandemic, there are some ways that you can still connect. Nextdoor is on the internet and is usually people in your neighborhood. You can connect that way. You could leave a note for your neighbor. My daughter and I did some chalk drawings in the summertime for our neighbors. You can also do FaceTime or Skype or some other way to connect with more than one person while you're cooking or sharing a meal. Online games, a lot of people have fun with that. So you're playing a game with somebody who's in a different place. The chain email story is one that I particularly like. So if you have a group of people that are on email, an email group, one person begins a story with a single sentence and then emails it to the next person without any other explanation or context, other than you're playing the game. And then this new author adds a sentence and passes it along. And you keep doing this and you decide how many times you're going to go around or when you will end. And then most of the time you'll have a pretty funny or ridiculous story by the end. And then you can also have a designated reader and a call time that you share the story. You can schedule a book or movie discussion, again, on one of those Skype or Zoom or phone chat. You could also create a music playlist or start with one song and have your friends or family add to that playlist and then share with everyone else. It's also a really good idea to structure your day. This is hard when we're working from home. And also try to wear clothes other than PJs or sweats. It's funny that you would see that or think that that would change, but it really makes a difference. You could also wear sweatpants and then a really nice shirt on top. A lot of people are doing that when the top half of their body is on the computer. But just by virtue of changing your clothes, it changes the way that you feel. Also have predetermined start and stop times to your work day or your school day so that you're not just in front of the screen the whole time. And if possible, make your work life and the rest of your life in different rooms. For some of us, this is hard. And if you can even kind of separate the space if it needs to all be in the same room so that your brain has a clear delineation between when I'm here, this is my work area, and when I'm here, this is my home and the rest of my life. If you are job searching, you should treat it like a job with certain hours with lunch and breaks in between. And here again, limit the time you watch the news if that's a stressor for you. Only once or twice a day, or maybe listen to something else on the radio or on the TV so that you're not like in the negative space all the time. Also going outside if you can, even for a few minutes. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a park or an open space nearby. Even if you're in an apartment building and you just go outside and breathe some fresh air, you'll be surprised at how different you will feel. Also, try one of these things at a time. And also, if you have a large project to do, if you break it into chunks of time. So for the next 2 hours, for example, I'll focus on X, and then I will take a break. Or then I will come back and focus on the next area of work, so Y, and then I will take a break or do something else. I find also that when I'm sitting for a long time, if I get up and just walk around my house a couple of times, it makes me feel better. And I think about if you were in a building and moving from meeting to meeting, you wouldn't be sitting the whole time. So something to think about. So I'm going to spend a little more time now on focusing on what you can control, because that has a profound impact on what you think. And then what you think about has an impact on how you feel. The first thing that happens when we encounter stress is that we recognize that it's a stressful situation, and our brain makes an appraisal of whether or not that stress, we're going to process it as positive or negative. And this happens in a split second. And then the response to that event, whatever it is based on our appraisal. Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? So you can consciously choose a different response. You have the power to choose what you think about and how you think about a particular experience. Now, this doesn't mean that negative things will not come into your thought process or come into your brain, but it does mean that you can then acknowledge that initial negative thought and say to yourself that you're choosing a positive thought instead. Sometimes we think about this as non-binary thinking, meaning there are not only two choices, this or that, but shades of gray. And I'll give you an example. So let's say you're working at home and your internet crashes. Then your first initial response might be, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble because I cannot do my work and I don't know how to fix it, and just a whole slew of negative things. So you could acknowledge, yes, this is super stressful, but now I'm going to take a break. This may be a good time to get a snack, and then I will call for help and I will be up again soon. So your brain chemistry is changing when you shift from negative to a positive. So here's another activity that you can do to practice making the shift from a negative thought to a positive thought. So first of all, think about what are your triggers for negative thinking, like watching the news, and what of those triggers, which of those triggers can you control? So I don't have to watch the news or listen to it, I can turn it off. Then as you're thinking about, I would like to focus on some positive things that have happened recently, you ahead of time, ahead of being in a negative situation, think of some positive things that have come out of the pandemic, or one thing that you are grateful for in your current situation. So then you will write down that one positive thing, and then again, focus on that positive, or have those nearby, your list of positives or things that you're thankful for, so that when you're up against a negative situation, you can think about the things that you're grateful for or that are positive. So maybe it's more time with your children or your significant other, more time to cook, more time to read. Maybe you had some time to learn a new skill, appreciating your pet. I've gotten to spend a lot of time with my dog, which is always a good thing. Also, my college-age daughter moved home with me for several months due to the pandemic. So that was also a good thing. Not having a commute and spending less money on gas. So these can be larger things that are happening in your life, or they can simply be the simple things that you're thankful for in this kind of new situation. So we also mentioned that it's really important to connect with people. So we want to focus on strengthening relationships or finding new ones. This is how we deposit into something called our resilience bank account. So making those connections with other people is like a deposit. Some other things that deposit into that account are getting enough sleep, good nutrition, exercise, meditation, self-compassion, gratitude, and saying no when you need to take care of yourself. So it is possible to meet new people during the pandemic, even though we can't do so in the ways in which we're most practiced in. So some of those ways are social media groups. You can also Google an interest of yours, Instagram, Twitter, all those social media platforms that most of us are familiar with. If you're not, you can look them up. Just be careful that you don't get into a negative space while on social media. That can also happen. And then I discovered this really wonderful site called Quarantine Buddies, which was developed by a couple of college students looking at the fact that lots of people were isolated and needed to connect. And so they thought of a way to do that. It matches you with people that have like interests. It only asks a few simple questions. The person does not have to live near you. And it gives you a way to connect with people through the internet and through this website. So people that are also looking for someone to chat with or to be friends with or to talk about a particular issue. It can be centered around something that you like or are interested in. You can also change. You can have a buddy for a week, or you can do it longer and stay with one buddy for a time. There are a lot of options. So the first video here is about the college students that put it together. And then the second one is a little bit about, shows the actual website, what that looks like. We're going to switch now to my favorite part, which is harnessing the power of your most powerful organ, your brain. We are going to talk about how you exercise your brain muscle. So I think it's really interesting that in our society, we have many reminders to exercise our muscles, but not enough focus on exercising your brain. It is a really powerful tool, and you can change your mindset so that you are resilient in any situation with practice. And the way that you do that, or what allows our brains to do that, is something called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to make new connections through practice. So this video is a little bit about neuroplasticity and how we use our brains to do just that. So the reason that you should know about it is that you can change what you think about and how you perceive a situation, as we've been talking about in the last few minutes, with some practice. We used to think that you could only really learn things for a very short period of your life, like when you were young. But now studies have shown that you can learn things and make new connections for your entire life. You can change the automatic response to stress or an uncomfortable situation with practice. Your brain pathways fire each time you present or learn or observe new information. And if you practice and think about or use that new information, your brain structure changes and will remember what you've practiced. So we're going to exercise to replace negative connections with positive ones. Again, practice, start small, and you could start with the activity that we talked about earlier with the code word or imagery of something that you found either fun or interesting or reminds you of a happy time. So another way to practice is here in this activity, looking at these sentences, reword them from the negative statements into positive ones. So for example, I'll do the first one. I'm stuck in the house because of the stay-at-home order. So rewording that, I might say, I'm stuck in the house, but I get to spend more time with my dog. Okay, and just that simple rewording helps us practice reminding ourselves to move from a negative to a positive thought. And again, you can also acknowledge the negative thought and then say to yourself, I'm choosing to replace that with a positive thought, or use the code word that reminds you of a pleasant experience that we talked about earlier. So there is a psychologist by the name of Kelly McGonigal who talks about just what we were talking about earlier with giving your brain practice to focus on the positive. What she talks about and has spent time helping people learn is changing how you think about stress. So telling yourself it's positive, then your body will begin to believe you. So saying that, let's say you're breathing faster, that you say to yourself, my body is now taking in more oxygen, so I will have more energy to do the things I need to do. Same with if your heart is beating faster because you're excited or anxious about something, thinking it is pumping blood throughout your body to get you ready to face whatever it is you're going to face. This actually creates the biology of courage. So in addition to cortisol that we talked about earlier, your body also, or your brain, releases oxytocin, a neurohormone that fine-tunes your brain's social instincts. It is a stress hormone, but it also has a natural ability to motivate you to connect with others, which when you do that, naturally reduces your stress level. Your empathy is also increased by the release of oxytocin and your willingness to help others. So it's also been shown that when we do something for other people, that caring for someone else or focusing on someone else outside ourselves creates resilience in our bodies. So Dr. McGonigal looked at a Harvard study where participants were taught to rethink their body's stress responses as good. Just as I mentioned before, the heart pounding or beating quickly. And what they found was over time, these people actually, in a stressful situation, their bodies did not react as if they were in a negative situation, but they were able to stay much calmer. There also was a lower death rate with people who focused on that stress was a good thing and that it could motivate you to seek out the company of others. She actually found that major stressful life events, even though in the general population increased the death rate by 30%, those who have spent some time caring for others, regardless of how many stress there were, that lowered their incidence of death rate so that there was a 0 increase in deaths in that group. So again, caring creates resilience, and how you think about stress, seeing it as helpful or motivating, and then how you act, because we act based on how we feel and what we think about, will also create resilience. You are creating the biology of courage. So stress gives us access to our hearts, and a compassionate heart finds joy and meaning in connecting with others. And the adrenaline that you feel can give you more energy and motivate action. And while you're practicing staying in this positive vein, you're sending a message to your brain that you trust yourself to handle life's challenges and that you don't have to handle those challenges by yourself. So we're not going to play the Kelly McGonigal video here, but I put a link at the bottom of this page because it's about a 14-minute video. But if you have time, I suggest you watch it. It's really great. So spending a little more time on training a resilient mind, there's another doctor named Dr. Rick Hansen who talks a lot about overcoming the negativity bias. So negative experiences tend to stick in our heads, kind of like Velcro, and positive experiences often do not. They bounce off. So historically, again, this was because a negative experience usually meant that we were in danger of some kind, and positive were ones that we didn't have to pay so much attention to. You may have had this experience, you're going through your day and somebody says something nice to you and you may say thank you, but you don't pay a lot of attention. And then something negative happens and your brain sticks on the negative thing. You think about it the rest of the day. You go home and you're still thinking about the negative thing. So we can, again, use the power of our brains and what we think about to move away from that negative experience. It used to be that avoiding bad things was much more consequential, as I mentioned. So, and the brain, though, can become sensitized to negativity, but we're not avoiding bad things that are directly related to life safety anymore. We're not being eaten by a wild animal. Mostly people are not starving or cold for long periods of time. So we can shift and focus on that good thing instead of the negative. So he suggests something called the HEAL method. And this is a little bit longer version of using the word imagery. So the point is to practice holding on to good experiences in your brain, actually focusing on the good for a little while. So it's easy to bring that image back up to you when you need it. So experience doesn't equal learning, but repetition does. So you might decide that you're going to think about someone you care about, your friend, a family member, or your pet. Focus on how that person or pet makes you feel and think about it for 10 to 20 seconds. So doing this, you're letting the good feeling absorb into your brain. You're letting it sink in. You can do this whenever you experience something that makes you feel good, just for 10 to 20 seconds. So then you have a library, if you will, or a reservoir of these good experiences. Think of it as exercising the positivity muscle of your brain. You are installing in your brain what it feels like to take in the good. And again, this is not covering up the negative. Instead, it is overcoming the old Stone Age bias that focusing on the negative keeps you safe. Then when you are making this link, you are also moving that experience, the good experience, from your short-term memory to long-term storage. You're taking control of what you learn. It's why focusing on what you are grateful for every day, even small things, will make you feel better immediately in the short term, and in the long term, train your brain to focus on and look for good things. We're moving from survival to thrival. So our life actually becomes better while we're taking in the good. So it helps us develop psychological resources and allows us to be more resilient and bounce back from challenges, regardless of what they are or for how long they go on. The built-in benefits also of training your brain to focus on the positive is that then becomes the overriding default. The more you practice, the better you are at doing something, just like riding a bike or learning to walk or read. Think about how long those things took for us to do. We take them for granted now, but actually when you were first learning them, they took a while. So treating yourself kindly can sensitize your brain to the positive. It's also contagious when you do that. And remember that practicing is an important component. So one other example of training your brain muscle is this Native American story that you may have heard before, and I think it bears repeating here. So this story is about a fight between two wolves. One wolf was good and the other was evil. So a grandfather tells his grandson, "In my head is a terrible fight between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." That same fight is going on inside of you, in your brain, and inside every other person's brain too. The grandson thought about this story for a minute, and then he asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The grandfather simply responded, "The one that you feed." In other words, the one that you pay attention to. So as we train our brain to overcome negative with positive, we are feeding the positive wolf, so to speak. You're better able to deal with stress, recover from trauma, and pursue our goals, all of which is really the foundation for resilience. So an attitude of gratitude actually empowers you. And learning to change your thinking can actually change the world. When focusing on what is good, People become less vulnerable to manipulations of fear, anger, possessiveness, and scarcity. People are less likely to obtain or hold on to an us versus them mindset. So you can see how training your brain has positive implications for our world. So what did we discover today? Well, we talked about the different things that would help us move our thought process from a negative to a positive. So remembering those, using word imagery to connect to a positive experience or something that made you feel good, write it down. Also review the techniques in this presentation and choose which ones you would like to practice, whether it's focusing on what you can control, rewording negative sentences or experiencing into positive ones, thinking about how to make stress your friend. And then remember that training your brain takes practice, but that it does work. It is a muscle that you have control over. So we discussed initially how our current situation is unlike disasters or challenges we may be familiar with and why that's true. We also talked about how stress affects your body and your brain, and that we can harness that stress so that it's beneficial if we do that consciously with practice. We also learned that our brains are our most powerful muscle, that our brains respond to practice, and that we can learn new things, that this is called neuroplasticity. We also discovered how we can cultivate a resilience mindset. And then we talked about how small steps or small actions, small bits of practice can add up to big results. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation and that you will go back over the practice activities and also spend some time with the videos. Thank you so much.